Today on Better Book Clubs, a common book lover's illness. Do you have it too? So in 2018, I read a story on the BBC website about a common illness among book lovers that I recognized for sure in myself. I don't know, is it fair to call it an illness? A malady, maybe? They were talking about a Japanese term, sundoku, which apparently translates into to pile up reading, or as they put it, to buy books you are never going to read. Apparently the term dates back to 1879 or so, and it doesn't have a negative connotation. But those of us who love books and who have this, let's just call it a compulsion to buy books and bring them home and pile them up, and then never get around to reading them, recognize this as maybe not the most positive thing. I was visiting my brother recently. He's just moved into a new house, and he pointed out in his basement 50 boxes of books that he hasn't read yet. And he said he calculated that if he were to read 50 pages a day for the next 20 years of his life, that's how long it would take to get through all of the books in those boxes. So obviously that's not going to happen. Then I was talking about this problem with a friend of mine just the other day, and he said he does the same thing, but he pointed out that if you can just kind of let go of your expectation that you're actually going to read all of these books and just accept that there's pleasure, as he put it, in just reading the first chapter, then maybe it's not such a bad thing. It has to do with our expectations of what we're going to do with these books. I think there's also pleasure in the possibility that they represent. So I have all these books lying around that I've never read, but the possibility of reading them actually makes me feel happy. Maybe there are times when I feel a little bit pressured, like the books are piling up, but I would say that more often I just feel really happy to have all of these books around me that I'm interested in, and knowing that whatever reading mood I'm in, I can find a book in my house that I'm interested in reading. And of course, there's also the pleasure of going into a bookstore and browsing around and picking books up off the shelf and perusing them, and then taking a few of them home because they look like the kinds of books you would really like to read someday. And some of them will be read. So I'm going to say sundoku is not so much an illness. Full disclosure, that was my word anyway. And it's maybe more a weakness. Because if I'm going to be honest, I just went into my bedroom and looked at the stacks of books next to my bed and counted them. There were 114. And these are just the books that I have an intention of reading. There are also lots of books in my house that I have no expectation of ever reading. I haven't read them, and I don't even think I'm going to read them. Okay, so I have literally over 100 books next to my bed that are piled up, that are there because I think at any moment I might want to read one of them. But then what about the books that are actually shelved that I'm not expecting to read anytime soon, but I haven't read yet? In all fairness, sometimes I do go looking for a book that for whatever reason has come up in conversation, or I've decided I need it for my classroom, and I'll go looking for it and I'll find it in the house. That's what happens when you have two English majors married to each other. So I got to wondering, how many books, aside from those that are on the floor in my bedroom that I think I'm going to read soon, how many books in my house have I not read yet? So I went down to the shelves where our fiction is shelved, and it's all alphabetized by author. So I went through just one little segment that had authors whose last names begin with B through D. It's not all of the B through Ds, but it was like a section of the bookshelf, and I counted. And that little section had 48 books on it, of which I've only read 22. So if we were to extrapolate from that, that means that half of the books in my house on the shelves I haven't even read. Now, I know this sounds familiar to you. I know that some of you have the same problem. Weakness, malady, whatever you want to call it. So it's tempting to make some kind of New Year's resolution that I'm only going to read books that are already in my house that I haven't read before, but I know I could never hold myself to that because things come up and you want to read what's new and you want to read books that people have recommended that you don't have. I get a lot of books out of the library. I love going to a used bookstore and buying used books, but sometimes I buy brand new books. So is this really a problem? Honestly, I think it's more a symptom of being the kind of person who's interested in everything, who's interested in learning new things, who's interested in knowledge, who's enthusiastic and imaginative. Because when I buy them, I actually imagine that I'm going to read them. So honestly, as long as the books aren't taking over my house, which they're not, I don't really think this is a problem or an illness or a malady or a weakness at all. I think it probably just indicates an enthusiasm for reading, and that's a good thing. I don't know, what do you guys think? I'd be really interested to hear. How many books do you own that you haven't read? How many books are piled up in your bedroom, just waiting to be read at any moment now? So the next thing I'm going to do is go deal with that stack of 114 books, because honestly, that is a little bit ridiculous. I'm going to see if I can get that reorganized and put some books away, kind of just declutter a little bit so that I know better what I have, and I have at hand the books that I'm really most likely to read next. So stick around and see how I reorganize my slightly out of control list of books I want to read soon. In the meantime, if you like what you see here, please subscribe, and I'll be back soon.